Welcome to Hurt at Work, a Kentucky workers' comp podcast. Today, Louisville workers' compensation attorney Scott Scheynost is going to provide helpful information, tips, and advice for injured workers and their families. Scott's goal is to help you to maximize the benefits you receive. If working's got you hurting, sit back and listen to Scott address topics that matter to you. Well, welcome back. We have workers' compensation attorney Scott Scheynost in the studio, and today we are going to talk about how workers' comp claims can lead to other types of claims. Scott, welcome back.
Good to see you again, Jim.
Absolutely fun to see you, buddy. We've been doing this for years.
Longer than we want to admit. Yeah.
Well, but there's a lot of information out there, and there are new people coming to the podcast, or new people coming to the website. We've done blog posts.
With age comes the wisdom. Let's go with that.
I hope so. I need to get older then. So
I got you covered for both of us.
Thank you, brother. Okay, so workers' comp claims. This is basically when somebody's injured at work, injured on the job, hurt at work.
Right.
The name of the podcast.
Right.
But sometimes that actually can lead or involve other types of claims. So let's kick it off.
Yeah, this week, every call I had 4 or 5 different issues besides workers' comp. So.
Wow.
What happens is if you have a work-related injury, it's not entirely in a vacuum by itself. There could be other claims involving it, and sometimes people have a hard time figuring out which one's which, and we'll talk about a couple of these today. It's kind of a hodgepodge, basically what can happen when you get hurt at work. First of all, and we'll talk about Kentucky, but this applies to a lot of other states too, if you get hurt at work, usually it's a workers' comp claim, all right? Now, is it something else? Well, it depends on how you got hurt, who hurt you, and what else is going on with your employer. So a lot of times when you're hurt at work, in addition to the workers' compensation claim, there can be several other claims involved in this. And a couple of them are like third-party claims, we call them, because there's a third party outside of the employer and the worker. There's a third party involved. Best case scenario for that is if you're working for a delivery company, you and your delivery company, the delivery company is responsible for your injuries if you get hurt at work. Well, you're delivering something, but get rear-ended by another car. So that's the third party.
It could be a sales rep.
Could be a sales rep.
Doing territory coverage.
Or somebody that has podcasts that they're trying to get with attorneys. So those people you really got to watch.
I know that guy.
Okay. But seriously, the third party that may have caused a work-related injury can also be responsible to the person that got injured, the injured employee, outside of the workers' compensation claim. And there's different scenarios. We'll go through some of these in a second, but this is real important because if there's a third party, the main thing is that there might be other things available to you outside of workers' comp. In workers' comp, the system's designed to get you benefits quickly. Workers' comp, off-work benefits, money for medical expenses, so you can get better and go on with your life. But in exchange for that kind of quicker resolution for a lot of this stuff, you don't get other things. You don't get pain and suffering. There's limits on how much money you can get, how much you can get, how long you can get it, the way you can get it. There's a lot of limits in workers' comp that sometimes don't apply to the third-party claim. So if you get hurt at work, the typical benefits you're going to get are money for being off work and money for the permanent injury and in medical treatment. You don't get pain and suffering. The money you get for being off work is limited. There's a statutory limit of around $1,200 a week. You get 2/3 of your average weekly wage. If you're lucky enough to make $6,000 a week, 2/3 of that would be $4,000. Well, in Kentucky, for a workers' comp claim, you only get $1,200. The length of time you get benefits is usually about 425 weeks for a permanent injury, which is 8 years. It can be longer than that, especially if you have...
Which is so funny because it's a permanent injury, you only get payments for X number of years.
There are a lot of built-in limits in the workers' comp system to decrease the amount of exposure for the employer, and these numbers are all changed from different states. But in Kentucky, generally for a partial permanent injury, it's about 425 weeks, and there's exceptions to everything I'm telling you. So workers' comp benefits are limited. If there's another way to put more money in your pocket for your damages, and your permanent injury is going to last more than 8 years. You may have pain and suffering that lasts more than 8 years. So if there's a way to recover money for that, we want to do that. And the way to do that, if another third party is responsible, is a third-party claim, a lawsuit against them. And we're going outside the workers' comp world. But this is another way to get you money. So if you get hurt in a situation where a third party is responsible at work for your injury, you may want to look into pursuing these third-party claims. I mentioned earlier the motor vehicle accident. There's other situations where the third-party claim may come into play. Let's say that you were at work and you're using a machine and the machine caused an injury to you. If the machine didn't have proper safeguards to it, if it was a dangerous machine, there may be a product liability action against the machine.
Well, that makes sense. So the machine itself is somehow defective or basically installed improperly. There could be all sorts of different things that could cause that injury.
We see that a lot where the machine might be missing a safety guard and somebody's finger gets cut off.
Unbelievable.
Excuse me. Another situation might be where somebody is on a premises and they slip and fell, or they're attacked by a dog. That's a work-related injury too. The delivery man's delivering stuff, but the floor was wet. They didn't tell him about it. He slipped and hurt his back. Well, now we may have potential third-party case against the premises.
And let me ask you this: these cases actually can be filed simultaneously, right? I mean, you don't have to wait to finish my comp claim before we can start my accident claim, because again, they got this little thing called statute of limitations.
Correct.
You want to define what that is?
Yeah, and in Kentucky, the statute of limitations for workers' comp and the third-party case is different. In workers' comp, it can be extended by money for being off work, TTD, temporary total disability benefits. And if you have a couple of surgeries and you're off work for 2 years and then the money stops, you can have 2 years from the last date of payment to file a claim. It can be a significant amount of time. A lot of times the third-party case only has a 1-year statute of limitations. So you got to get going and jump on that as soon as you possibly can. Now, in addition to these cases, there might be some other ones out there. You may also have a Social Security disability case.
Right.
Social Security disability comes into play when you're not able to do your job or any other job. And you can have both a Social Security case and a workers' compensation case at the same time.
Well, I believe in the past, we've actually had another attorney on who handles motor vehicle accidents, and we talked about the interplay. And then we had another attorney on who talked about the interplay between a comp claim and a Social Security disability. And again, SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, is for people who have a significant work history. They've qualified. They've worked enough quarters,
right,
basically, to qualify for those benefits.
Yeah, the Social Security Administration has criteria for you to be able to receive it. And one of those criteria is you have to work a certain amount of time. So if you've met that criteria and you're not able to work in any job, you could get SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance.
And again, just as a common disclaimer, we're not talking about retirement benefits. A lot of people get that screwed up when they hear Social Security. No, we're not talking about retirement benefits. This is SSDI. This is disability insurance.
That's correct. It's entirely different from Social Security retirement. And people pay this every time they have money taken out of their paycheck. It's part of the FICA taxes. There's a part of it that's designed for SSDI. So a lot of people have paid into the system for this for a long period of time. And it can be a significant amount of money. The money you get basically is based on how much money you've paid into the system. So the more money you've earned over time, the more money you might be eligible from SSDI. A lot of people don't understand that you can get them both at the same time, SSDI and workers' comp. There are some offsets in the SSDI in Kentucky for money if you get a certain dollar amount and you're making a certain amount for SSDI.
Well, and that's something I wanted to come back to, because you may have a situation where your workers' compensation attorney is not handling your Social Security disability claim. Maybe you've got another firm that does that, because not all firms handle all types of injuries.
Yeah.
And in that situation, if the settlement agreements are not worded properly, you can actually have a decrease in your Social Security benefits, right?
Right, and that can happen even if it's worded properly, but there are some things that you can generally do to decrease that from happening.
Yeah.
If you're not represented by an attorney, that may not occur. If the attorney doesn't know what they're doing, that may not occur. But
you want to make sure, if you've got two different attorneys, you want to make sure they're both aware that you have different claims going on. Sometimes the workers' comp attorney may not realize you're also filing a Social Security disability claim.
Right, and let everybody know if that's happening. I think the main thing for somebody out there that especially somebody around 55 years old, that seems to be the magic number for Social Security disability. If you're that age and you're not able to work your old job and you have a significant injury, not only in addition to the workers' comp claim, you may also have an SSDI claim, and you need to talk to somebody about that.
Yeah. Other types of claims that we've talked about as we prepared for this, short-term and long-term disability. How does that work? Because again, that is different from SSDI.
Yeah, what we've talked about a lot so far has been workers' compensation and SSDI, which are basically government programs. The short-term and long-term disability are usually a private insurance that you've obtained either through your employer or on your own. And they usually kick into gear in certain criteria. Each policy is a little bit different, but essentially most of them, especially short-term, will pay up to 6 months if you can't do your job. And then long-term kicks in after 6 months. They have different definitions of disability. Some of them apply if you can't do your job. Some of them apply if you can't do any job.
Right.
Some of them give you more money than others. Some of them, especially long-term disability, may require you to apply for SSDI because they'll get a credit usually if that happens. So they actually require a lot of people to do that. But usually these are private insurance programs, which means that you've got to contact the private insurance company you got it with, and that private insurance company may have 1,000 disability policies. You actually have to read the policy to see what you're entitled to get, to see how it's going to be impacted by other money you get, to see what you've got to do to apply for it. And they're all a little bit different, but what you need to think about is if you can't do your job, if you've got either short-term disability, which we call STD, or long-term disability, LTD, if you've got either one of those, you need to be looking into that as soon as possible. I don't get into those very much, but what I have seen is that the carriers will use a lot of weird excuses to get out of them. And one of the weird excuses is they will be very, very strict on the application process, where somebody's got to apply within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after being disabled.
Wow.
And a lot of these policies are designed to weed people out, not to help them. So, if you've got one of these policies, you really need to look at them very carefully to see how they're worded and follow the terms of them, and make sure that you do what you're supposed to in order to get those benefits.
As much as we've talked about workers' comp over the years, and, when we look back and we talk about how sometimes the company's not always on your side once you've gotten injured because you're costing them money and things like that. If there is a short-term disability or a long-term disability policy that was just part of when you got the job, this was part of your compensation package, you need to notify HR, but I'm always worried that, whoever's handling that may not be your best friend as well. So you got to push.
That's true. And again, you've got to get a copy of the policy. And it's really boring, but you've got to read it and see what you're entitled to receive. But a lot of people don't have it. It doesn't apply in most of the claims I have. In big employers, a lot of times it does. Ford, UPS, they may have a short-term, long-term disability policy. It applies more to managers and white-collar workers than it does other folks. So if somebody's in management, a lot of times they'll have a long-term, short-term disability policy that's actually a lot better than workers' comp because, like I said, there's limits in workers' comp, but you can get these policies where there's no limits on them. But the bottom line is you need to look at them and go through them, and each one's a little bit different. So there's not, one cure-all for all of them. You just got to go through it, make sure you follow the terms of it, and pursue it if you've got it. And then what's really weird is at the end of this, at the end of the claim, you may end up having to pay some money back to them if you get workers' comp because a lot of them have what are called subrogation claims, subrogation provisions involved in them too. So it gets to be very complicated. I think the number one thing to remember is if you've got short-term, long-term disability is to investigate it, make sure you fill out all the forms properly, and if you think you're entitled to receive it, pursue it. But a lot of people just don't have it. And if you do have it, check it out. Make sure you don't forget about it.
Well, and I think the biggest problem for a lot of people is when I'm hurt, things are changing. I'm trying to get answers from my doctors, trying to get answers from my company. And something like that can easily slip through the cracks. I mean, you just may not know about it, or you forget about it.
Or you're concerned and concentrating on getting workers' comp. It was a workers' comp injury, so you want to get that. And a lot of times you're fighting them, and you're actually ended up fighting 3 or 4 other battles at the same time. But this is the major one because it was workers' comp. Some employers are better than others about helping their employees with that. Some of them provide it, but don't even tell them about it. A lot of times, if you wonder if you have it, look on your pay stub and see if there's a deduction for it. And a lot of folks, I've had clients that couldn't tell me how much money they made. We had to bring the wife in because she knew what check was, and Sometimes we got to actually look at the pay stubs to figure some of these things out. But a lot of folks have a deduction for this; they don't even know about it, especially at the bigger employers.
Well, I tell you, we're sitting here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're recording this in early December. By the time this comes out, we'll be right around the holidays and the start of the new year. It might not be a bad New Year's resolution just to kind of go through your documents and figure out, what do you have?
Right. Well, I like long-term and short-term disability because one of the advantages of it is generally once you fill out the applications to prove you're disabled, you don't have to prove the cause of it like we do in workers' comp. We got to prove it's work-related. So a lot of times that kind of turns on the faucet of income for my clients and makes it a little bit easier for them to deal with things because they've got some income coming in. And typically in workers' comp, we're going to argue about things, and my position is going to be different from the defendant attorney's position, and we got to get a judge to decide. But it's usually once you can get it turned on, and once you get through that initial application process, the short-term and long-term disability is there and provides you some access to benefits that we may have to fight for a significant amount of time over in workers' comp.
Well, in that, again, coming back to the main theme of today's episode, how a workers' compensation claim can lead to other claims. I mean, we've talked about a lot of them. We've talked about a motor vehicle accident, which can lead to a third-party claim. We've talked about a product's liability because maybe the machine or the tool or whatever you were using that was involved in the injury wasn't installed or wasn't properly maintained. Premises liability, where hey, I'm doing my normal work here, and I'm suddenly I slip or I fall or maybe a
somebody
dog
drops something on top.
Somebody
of
drops
something. Those cases, too.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. I don't know if you can mention it on the episode, but you were telling me, these types of issues pop up a lot, and they can be horrendous.
Yeah, in certain situations, they're more common than others. First of all, if you have a job that requires you to drive, there's a good chance that you may be involved in an automobile accident caused by somebody else. If you're a construction worker and you're working at a facility where there's other trades there and other employers who drop things or don't pick things up, or I've seen them where they've hidden put things over holes and people stepped into them and got injured.
Yeah,
everybody that's worked at a construction site knows what I'm talking about. When you got multiple people there, there can be multiple causes of problems. There's a reason why everybody has to wear a hard hat. So if you're in situations where there's other parties involved, and you've been injured, you really need to look at this third-party thing because, number one, the benefits that you might be able to receive from that could be a lot more than the workers' comp claim.
Right.
It could be harder to get them. Usually the attorney fees cost more because it's a harder case and you spend more money. But
something, a lot of these are contingency fee.
They're almost all contingency.
Which means I don't have to pay up front, if the attorney wins my case. And comp is like this for you, right?
Yeah, we handle comp on a contingency fee, which means we don't charge you anything unless we recover money for you. We have expenses that might need to be recovered too. The third-party claims are almost always handled on the same manner with a contingency fee plus expenses. The fee changes depending on what you have as far as situations. For instance, slip and falls are always notoriously harder to deal with than other types of cases. All these cases can be handled on a contingency fee, Social Security, disability insurance. I don't do a whole lot of that. I generally refer that out to somebody I know that specializes in that. I'm pretty sure he handles those on a contingency fee.
Well, you can't really say he specializes, but they focus, as an attorney, it's just a Kentucky legal issue there. But
you're right.
They focus in that area of law.
You're correct.
Yeah.
But all these main things, the workers' comp, the third-party cases, and the Social Security disability insurance, generally will be handled on a contingency fee. The fees vary depending on the situation and what's going on. The long-term, short-term disability is more of a contract issue that can be handled either way, contingency fee or an hourly basis. Most people can't pay on an hourly basis. There's a couple other things that are floating around out there that I really don't want to get into too much depth, though. But sometimes if people get hurt at work are also eligible for unemployment insurance. And in certain situations where you're hurt but you can't do your job, but you can do other work, you might be eligible for unemployment. For instance, you get hurt and your job requires you to lift 50 pounds and the doctor says don't lift more than 25, or you can't do your job. Job says, okay, we can't do your job, we're not going to give you anything. And, you might be eligible for some workers' comp, but you could theoretically be eligible for some unemployment insurance too. There's some overlap in here. There's also some credits if they if you get unemployment insurance while you're also eligible for workers' comp. I don't want to get into that too much, but the bottom line is you may be eligible for unemployment insurance. If you think you might be eligible, I would advise you to apply. They seem to be a little bit more lenient since COVID on awarding unemployment insurance benefits. The one thing about applying for unemployment insurance benefits, if you have a workers' comp claim, is to remember whatever you say in that unemployment insurance application can be obtained and reviewed in a workers' comp claim. And, you want to be truthful and correct in all your statements, just like you would normally be, but especially so in these kind of documents, because those will be brought back up in the workers' comp claim at some time. And then there's some other things, too, sometimes applies in workers' comp claims. I don't generally handle those, but there's a possibility that somebody could have a wrongful discharge or wrongful termination case because of a workers' comp claim. That's not really workers' comp. It's more like a civil rights action where
it's basically retaliation.
Retaliation. Somebody's been discriminated against because they had a workers' comp, just like you might be discriminated against if you are a certain race, religion, things like that. So it's due to the workers' comp injury. It's not really the workers' comp claim, but it's caused by it. That can result in another lawsuit that's outside the workers' compensation claim itself. Again, that's more like a civil rights action. I don't handle those, but we can refer you to folks that do. But that's another possibility in all this stuff too. My situation where I see people that might be eligible for workers' compensation, for benefits other than workers' compensation, are typically in a car accident. Number one, there's a third party that might be responsible. Number two, there might be what are called PIP benefits.
Yeah, personal injury protection.
Yeah, in addition to your workers' comp. And that interplays with workers' comp. Workers' comp is what they call primary, which means if you get everything you're entitled to receive, then you only get it from workers' comp. But a lot of people do earn more money than workers' comp pays, and they can get additional benefits from PIP. A lot of times we'll argue with a workers' comp carrier about medical treatment, and PIP's a lot easier to deal with as far as getting medical treatment, so that can be a easier way to get some medical treatment taken care of.
And in Kentucky, that's pretty much automatic coverage for the person in the it's paid for by the car that you're in at the time of the accident, and it applies to the driver, but also each of the passengers independently.
Yeah, that's true.
A nice benefit.
Now, a lot of big employers, and I guess TARC is the first one that comes into mind, the local transit authority, they will waive that PIP benefit for that vehicle. And then if they waive it, there might still be other resources available. And a lot of big employers don't want to pay PIP. They figure we're paying workers' comp, and they got long-term, short-term disability, so they'll be okay. So even if the employer has waived benefits on your vehicle, there still may be insurance available through either the Kentucky Insurance Guarantee Association, or there may be benefits available through your own vehicle that apply to this. So a lot of the big employers cut expenses and don't have PIP, but there still may be PIP available. And again, I like it because we're almost always arguing with a workers' comp carrier about whether or not somebody needs a surgery. So if you've got PIP, a lot of times that gives money to the doctor and you can get your surgery over with before we have to have a judge decide it. So I really like that in a workers' comp situation. It can make my client's life a little bit easier. PIP has got a lot more limits on it, even though workers' comp has limits. PIP is usually only $10,000.
Right. So now you can buy additional PIP coverage.
It's
but
pretty
most
rare.
Probably don't.
Right.
Yeah.
In my life, I found that you can never have too much insurance. You may not be able to afford it, but you can have it. But if you do have a car accident and you're involved in all this stuff, one of the things we'll do is we'll actually look at your policy, and they call it a declaration sheet, and maybe even have you contact your agent to find out what you've got available too, because you're paying for it.
Right.
Well, you paid for it for 25 years, and you might as well use it. And our job is to try to make your life easier by trying to get all the benefits and resources that might be available for you. So I see motor vehicle accidents the most common thing that comes up in a workers' comp claim where there might be a third party when somebody's driving. Somebody might slip and fall or have some kind of premises issue where something drops on them, or some other kind of issue like that comes up a lot too. And in those situations, you got not only the people that cause the injury, but also the people that maybe own the property that might be responsible. There's a lot of other side issues with this. If you're at a construction site, there's a thing called up the ladder theory, which prevents some contractors from being responsible. I don't want to get into that too much.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you get hurt, you probably need to talk to an attorney, and they need to investigate whether or not this is something you can pursue. Dog bite cases are always interesting. Kentucky almost has what's called strict liability on dog bites, which if you get hurt at somebody's premises, you shouldn't got hurt by somebody's dog. They should have had that dog controlled. So there's usually a pretty decent third-party case.
Well, you know what I find interesting, I've spoken to a lot of attorneys about dog bite cases, actually, and there's this misconception that there's a first bite, kind of a gimme, and that doesn't exist.
Not in Kentucky.
Yeah. I didn't know this dog was going to bite. The fact that it bit establishes the liability.
Kentucky has a more strict rule on that than other states, and that may be true in other states. Is that everybody gets a warning on it, but the law in Kentucky is a little bit stricter on that. So if you get bit by an animal, number one, there's a good chance who owns the animal is going to be responsible. Number two, a lot of people that own their own houses also have homeowners policies that also provide insurance. So if you're bit by somebody's dog who owns the house, there's a good chance there's a source of recovery for your injuries. If you're bit by somebody's dog who doesn't own the property, that could be a little bit more difficult because they may not have insurance.
Right.
Not many commercial businesses have dogs that cause bites, so we're usually talking about a residential situation. And what has seemed to be the rule of thumb is if they own the property, they're going to have coverage. But if they don't own the property, it might be difficult to actually recover.
So a renter or an apartment renter
that makes it more difficult.
Yeah. Interesting. So we've talked about a lot of these different types of claims, and I think that the biggest thing that I've learned in talking with you over the years is that if there are multiple attorneys handling the various claims, to really make sure they're aware that you're involved with
that's
other
correct.
claims.
Yeah. Now I do a lot of workers' comp. I get into some of these other issues. Sometimes we'll co-counsel with other attorneys in different situations to try to get the best result for somebody. We've co-counseled with other attorneys on both sides. People send me stuff. I send stuff to other folks, and we have a little bit of a network that we deal with, and it helps you if you have us to talk to another attorney, because a lot of times we have the information they need, such as medical records and accident information and even policy information sometimes. They can take a couple weeks, if not months, to get. So we can usually speed up the process if we're involving, somebody else. But the bottom line in all this stuff is if there's somebody else besides your employer that had something to do with your injury, see if there's a third party available that might be also responsible for paying you for some of your damages. And talk to me or some other attorney about this. We're happy to talk to you. We handle these on a contingency fee basis for almost all the things we've talked about. My phone number's 502-937-5287. We can usually flesh out in a few minutes whether or not you have some potential third-party actions here. And the reason we're talking about this today is because I've had several people over the last couple of weeks come in with maybe a car accident case. They didn't realize they had a workers' comp claim too.
Absolutely.
Or they had a workers' comp claim where they got hit by a car and they didn't realize they had a motor vehicle accident. And I recently had another client who had a significant workers' comp claim but didn't realize he had an SSDI case. And we're still fighting in the workers' comp case, but I think he got his first check from SSDI last week. So,
which, when you're off of work, at least having that check come in,
every bit of money helps.
It means the world.
Yeah, and we can argue about anything as attorneys. So if you can get another source of income while we're arguing about one issue, that helps you out. That makes it a little bit easier, number one, for you to live with, and also takes some of the pressure off getting the case resolved. And I'm always happy when my clients are happy. Yeah. So if we can get another source of income for you, that helps. But just in the last month, I probably had 4 or 5 people that did not realize they had another potential claim out there. And, just a phone call or so, and maybe fill out some more papers, and we can give the medical records you've already given us permission to get to another attorney. And it's really pretty simple if we can get some other folks involved in this, even if it's something we don't do, and a lot of the stuff we do too. But the bottom line is if somebody else might be responsible, if you're older, you might have Social Security disability insurance available. If you're working for a big employer, you may have short-term, long-term disability. Talk to me or somebody else, and we'll try to flesh all these things through and try to get you as much as we can for your particular injury.
Well, Scott, outstanding. Again, I love the way that you just boil this stuff down. It is complicated. It is sometimes overwhelming, but you've done this for, 30 years now.
Longer than I want to admit.
Yeah, and so this is stuff that you've dealt with time and time again, and the benefit is you kind of understand this, and if I were trying to handle it on my own, I'm going to drop stuff. I'm going to miss stuff. I'm going to not even know that I have rights to certain benefits.
Right.
But again, that's why they need to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And once again, what's the if they want to contact you, they can go through the website ScheynostLaw.com, and there's a contact form.
There's a contact form.
But the best thing is just pick up the phone.
Call us, and we're happy to talk to you. If it's over the weekend or night, leave a message. We'll get back with you. We monitor the phone calls pretty regularly. Again, you can tell I like to talk, so I'm happy to talk to you. And again, it doesn't cost anything, so I'm not going to charge you by the hour just to talk to see if you've got a case. Happy to meet with you in person and even look over other documents if you need us to, and we do this regularly. So I hope if you've got any questions, you give us a buzz, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Outstanding. Scott, thanks as always for the information, and thanks for your time. I know, preparing for these episodes takes a little while, and getting in here and getting it all scheduled takes a little while, but I love the fact that you come on and you boil it down and you just make it simple. And I really, really appreciate your effort here.
All right. Enjoyed it. Thank you, Jim.
All right. See you, Guy. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Hurt at Work. Scott will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. For more information, be sure to visit ScheynostLaw.com. That's SCHEYNOST law.com. You can also follow Scott's Workers' Comp office on Facebook. Until next time, be safe and remember, Scott's ready to help, especially when you and your family need it the most.